Welcome to Distrust and Disparities, Dismantling Black Health Disparities podcast. We examine health disparities that disproportionately affect Black women and Black families. In addition, we amplify organizations and individuals working to dismantle racist health practices and systems to improve health outcomes for marginalized communities. I'm your host, Jasmine Moore, a registered nurse, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Camille White.
The whole, obligation to go get my EMT license forced me to spend time in the emergency department, which is where I found my love for in-hospital care and, really bonding with these patients and changing their experiences in the hospital.
In this episode, we interview Britney Daniels, a Black queer travel nurse, social advocate, and author. Britney's book, Journal of a Black Queer Nurse, utilizes personal experiences to highlight the racist, homophobic, and inequitable environments that thrive in many healthcare systems in the U.S. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Distrust and Disparities. We're glad to be back here with another episode. So let's get into it. Nurses comprise the largest component of the healthcare workforce. However, many people do not always understand exactly what nurses do, and TV and media are to blame. Nurses make up nearly half of the world's healthcare workforce and deliver almost 80% of the hands-on care. Nurses spend more time with the patients than any other healthcare professionals. Nurses have consistently ranked one of the most trusted professionals for years, according to public polls. But what do you do when you are working in a profession that makes you feel judged and unsupported and bullied? We're excited to have a special guest here with us today to share her experience with dealing with patients who refuse care simply because of the color of her skin, and also dealing with homophobic and bigoted coworkers who go out of their way to make your job a living hell just because of your identity. We would like to welcome our special guest, Britney Daniels, to the podcast to share her experience as a queer emergency room nurse from Chicago.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I'm such a fan of both of you, such a fan of the podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. So let's jump into it. We have a lot to unpack. We're excited about this conversation as well. All right, so we'll start with an icebreaker. We wanted to start by asking you about your first encounter with a medical injustice or health disparity. It could be something you or someone close to you experienced, or something that you read about that really stuck with you.
So this actually dates back to pre-nursing, and it had to do with me. I will never forget this. So as an adult, I started being sexually active. And one of the things that I was really, adamant about was getting myself tested. And I'm lucky enough to have a primary care doctor that I've been seeing since I think I was in, 20, maybe 19, 20. And she wasn't in on the day that I was available to go in, that where I wanted to get the testing done. And so I took an appointment with another doctor at the practice, thinking, no big deal. I'm just going in for testing. It's nothing super serious. And I get there and he comes in the room after the medical assistant, took my vitals and everything. And he asked me what I'm coming in for. And I said, I wanted to get tested. I wanted to get HIV testing, gonorrhea and chlamydia testing. And he asked me who I'm sexually active with, what gender. And I told him that I have sex with females. And he was like, oh, well, then you don't need HIV testing.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I think I do, right? But I'm a young kid, right?
Yeah.
I'm a young kid talking to this old white man who's a doctor with a white coat and stethoscope. And he's telling me you don't need it. And I'm like, well, what am I, I'm thinking to myself, I can't I don't have a place to argue with him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left without the testing that I needed, and, ended up going to a clinic and spending money, even though I had insurance. Right. And so it's just like, that was the first one. And I told my doctor about it later on, and she was appalled. Right. But I just thought to myself, how many people, right, every single day are denied access to something that they need.
Yeah. That's insane too, that a doctor who went through so much training and you would hope would have the knowledge that, STIs, STDs are spread through a number of activities, no matter what your gender is, no matter how you identify as, and would just be like, oh, you're good. Like, what you here for? Which is just like, excuse me, can you just be like, oh, great. I'm glad. Like, it should have been like, glad you came in, glad you're being responsible, glad you want to practice like safe sex, and like, let's get that done for you.
Exactly.
But like, and then people also too go through that whole thing of like, you don't want to question someone who has been lifted up onto a pedestal and is this authority figure that you're supposed to not question them, because who are you? You don't have a medical degree. You haven't been through years of schooling, and you haven't had years of experience in, say, a hospital or a practice or whatever. So you do then question yourself, which sucks, because then you question like your own advocacy and like, your body.
Right.
And that's so frustrating.
Yeah, situations like this, it really ruins your trust in your doctors and just like the healthcare field. Like, you're opening up, you're trying to get testing and things like that. And for them to completely dismiss you without any regards, for some people, it makes them not want to go back to a doctor's office, not to get, routine care and checkups. Like, I deal with a lot of patients who just have trust dealing with doctors and just being upfront and forward with what they need. And it's one comment that sticks with you, and it can determine like for the rest of your life how you interact with healthcare. So it's just sad and disheartening.
It is. It's so frustrating. And I actually left that appointment not getting any testing, because, the way he spoke to me and just his demeanor and attitude about the HIV thing made me not even I'm like, I don't want this guy, doing a pelvic exam on me.
Oh,
right?
No. Oh, no.
So I'm like, I'll just go somewhere else. Right. But, I'm sure there's so many kids that age who, if they go through something like that, they're just like, well, I don't need it. Right. And they just don't get the testing ever. Right. Or, for years on end. And then they end up, dealing with health problems that could have been prevented.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Sorry to get so deep on the icebreaker.
No, we need to talk about it. Like on our previous episode where we talk about STIs and the prevalence, like this needs to be talked about. This needs to be discussed. So yes, needs
Definitely.
to be talked about.
Have you checked out our website? There you can find all of our episodes and show notes. You can even listen directly on the site and catch up on any previous episode you may have missed. You can read our bios and see what we're up to. Also, we made it even easier to contact us. Just fill out the form on our homepage and click submit. We invite you to recommend guests and topics we should feature. So what are you waiting for? Go check us out at distrustanddisparities.com. Britney, we all know that like you began your career as a firefighter. We just want you to talk about like what that experience was like, then how that influenced you into becoming a nurse, and then just those process and those steps of firefighter, EMT, emergency room tech, and then registered nurse. And then I guess I also had an additional question, because my understanding, at least with firefighters, I thought typically most people started out as like an EMT and then went into firefighting. So I was just sort of curious with your background and how your progression was a little different.
Definitely. And, over the last, I want to say, how old am I? I'm 33. I want to say over the last decade, the processes have changed a lot, where in the firefighting profession, they're very strict about having that medical experience. But in 2019, oh my God, 2000, girl.
It's like he was a nurse and a firefighter.
I'm losing it. In 2009, when I was a firefighter, a lot of folks were pushing like, no, I don't want to do the medical side. I only want my axe, my saw, and the turnout gear. That was the culture. It was almost this, dichotomy. You were either doing medical or you were doing firefighting. And then there was just this competition and this arrogance, right, on both sides, where like the firefighters are thinking, I'm too good to do the medical side. And the medical side is like, I'm so smart and you're not. And that was kind of the culture that I experienced in my, short career as a firefighter. So for me, out of high school, and I've told the story a couple times where I was in high school and I had to have my meeting with my guidance counselor because we had to talk about what our plans were post graduation, right? And I had no idea what I wanted to do, zero. But I was sitting in the chair outside of her office and I saw a little tower with pamphlets on it, and there was a pamphlet with a Black girl in a firefighter turnout outfit and the hat or the helmet and the axe. And I was like, that's dope. I'm going to do that.
Pamphlet changed it all.
Yep. Literally changed everything. And so from there, in the meeting with the guidance counselor, she's like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? Right. So I signed up to be on the Explorer in the Explorer program, which was like a cadet program for firefighters where you could go, you go to the station, you do physical training, you train with all like the trucks, the engines, and you get to go to all these events where you can see, what it's like to be a firefighter. And I happened to be a part of the group where the local part-time department was looking for firefighters, and they wanted firefighters from that cadet program. So I was lucky enough to be chosen, from that group to get hired on as a part-time firefighter. And at that time, I had zero medical training whatsoever, just like first aid, And at some point during my firefighting, the chief let us all know in a meeting, hey, everyone's got to get their EMT license. It doesn't have to be paramedic, but it has to be basic. And that's going to be a requirement. And we're kind of, it's like the whole ADN, BSN thing where they started making everyone have their bachelor's degree. Firefighters were required to get their EMT license so that they could provide medical care, which makes perfect sense now, right? In hindsight.
Yeah. It's like you're fighting fires, but you're also then going in to rescue people who then need aid.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
It all goes hand in hand.
I'm like, why was I allowed to do this without an EMT license? So yeah, that was the whole, EMT aspect of it. And honestly, I really did enjoy I enjoyed the work. So, going to these calls, walking in, not having a clue what's going on before we cross the threshold of the door. I enjoyed that part. And I enjoyed the patients, the people. As far as like firefighting, though, there isn't really a personal aspect to it. You go to a scene, you turn on the hose, and not to make it seem, like it's not hard work, because it is. It's incredibly difficult and it's exhausting, but there's zero personal engagement. There's none. The only communication is with the folks who you're fighting the fire with. Other than that, to me, it just felt lonely. I didn't have a community. I didn't feel like I bonded with anyone. No one was trying to be more than just, a strict, like a coworker with me. They had their cliques, I talked a little bit about it in the book where, it didn't seem like I was included. And that meant, late nights where food wasn't saved for me, where no one was helping me clean. I was doing the tasks by myself that needed to be done around the station and things like that. And I just felt, I felt isolated. And, the whole EMT transition, I think, really saved me, because I feel like I would have just stayed in it. I feel like I would have just kept doing the firefighter thing because it was a career path, right? But the whole, obligation to go get my EMT license forced me to spend time in the emergency department, which is where I found my love for in hospital care and, really bonding with these patients and changing their experiences in the hospital.
Yeah, because you talk about it in the book, just like your experience as a firefighter. And like I mentioned in the intro, we have this idea about firefighters, like this community, this bond, like you work together. But if you're in a field and firefighting is heavily male dominated, and I bet probably heavily like white male dominated, and
Yes.
just dealing with those microaggressions in those situations. Like we're here to help others, and once the job is over, just not having that bond, that community, when people just go out their way just to make it hard, that's like very, very tough. And it's just very scary. And it doesn't have to be like that. Like we're all here to do a job to help others. And it's just frustrating. Very frustrating.
Definitely. And one of the other things that also made firefighting a little scary, and I experienced this in nursing too, the competition. Always trying to, one up somebody or make someone else look bad to make yourself look better. It's definitely not as prevalent for me, at least in nursing, but it was absolutely prevalent in the fire service. And it made for a very toxic environment, because instead of feeling like you've got folks who have your back, you feel like you've got to watch your own back, and keep yourself safe. Yeah.
That's never how you should feel, especially in such a dangerous profession like that. And I think TV shows maybe occasionally will like quickly touch on it and then be like, it's all kumbaya at the end. I think about like the show 911, where you have, a Black woman, you have an Asian firefighter as well. And like they make it seem like we're one big happy family. And like maybe there's like a few bad seats here, but like whatever, they don't really matter. In general, it's all wonderful. And it's just like, that's not the real world. And you're also setting people up who look at the show and go, maybe I want to do this for a living. And then they get here and they get slapped in the face with reality. And then they're in situations like you were in where you luckily saw a way out, but so many people just stick with it. And you should never be in a profession, especially as dangerous as this one, then going, can I trust the people that I go to work with every day? Can I know that I'm showing up to a scene and know that they're going to be worried about me and making sure that I get home? Because that's, like Jasmine said, TV and media have they've done a disservice to actually showing really how things are and being honest about racism, being honest about homophobia, being honest about you're going to encounter some raggedy ass people at work. And, be prepared for it, or let's show people organizing and stopping it, or removing the people in power who aren't doing anything about it.
Right. That's huge. Yeah, it's absolutely, you said it really well, the disservice that media, is doing for folks who are considering going into these careers. And you're absolutely right. It is a big, huge slap in the face when folks enter these careers and they figure out, oh my God, this is nothing like the show.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Absolutely. And we wanted to talk about your transition from being an EMT to segueing into the hospital, and how you were speaking on, you got to interact more with the patient. So we would love just to hear about that transition.
Yeah, honestly, so I am very, very lucky, because the whole transition from firefighter to EMT was sort of forced on me, and it was good for me. It was beneficial. Similarly, when I was an ER tech, I was like, oh, I'm making $14 an hour. This is dope, right? I'm I'm paying the bills. I'm working like 6 days a week, getting this overtime in. Like, I thought I was good. I was like, I'm not going to nursing school. Why would I do that when I can stay doing that? God. Right. And there's nothing wrong with being an EMT. Let me say it right now. But I had no motivation to keep going. Right. Until one day, something happened. I'll leave it out so that folks will read the book. But something happened that got me fired. Okay, and that was like the big reality check that I needed. It was the kick in the ass that I needed, because at that point I was like, I guess I should consider maybe advancing my career a little bit, right? And so at that point, I started taking the prereqs that I needed to, to go to nursing school. I was in a place where I was settling, right? I was bringing home a check, which I thought was a lot at the time. I had insurance, I had fun at work, and I was good at what I did. And although people around me were telling me, you should go to nursing school, you should get a degree, I just kept pushing back against that. And it really did take that swift kick in the ass for me to be like, oh yeah, I should, dang, I ain't got a dime in my savings account, because I was just making ends meet, right? And thinking about like how the things that I was doing in the hospital were fun, but the things that I should have been doing were things that I needed to have a degree to do, right? And a nursing license to do. So I'm glad that happened, right? It's interesting how the whole thing happened where I was terminated, and there was another responsible party there who was white and a higher rank, and they did not get fired, of course, so that was difficult for me. Also something that I'll never forget, when you think about the disparities between the disparities in differences in punishment when it comes to Black versus white folks, and, people in positions of power versus not. I lost my job and I thought I lost everything. So I kept, after I got fired, I was applying for jobs while simultaneously taking these prereqs for nursing. And every time I would go to a job interview, they would ask me about my previous experience. And they would say, oh, well, why'd you leave your last job? And me being very honest, and, right, I would be like, oh, I got fired. and
Right. I read that part and I was like, what? I wish I could talk to little Britney like that.
Girl, no.
Shush. Just be quiet.
You don't have to tell them that.
Right. Right.
It's so funny because it reminds me of, I have an older sister. When I think I was 10 maybe, she got into a very slight fender bender, and the police came to the scene just to, check on everyone, write up the report. And they asked me, they said, hey, were you wearing your seatbelt? And I was like, no. And my sister looks at she like darts her eyes at me and was like, what? Right? Yes, you were. And I was like, no, I wasn't. Listen, I do a lot, but I ain't gonna lie to you. You gonna get the truth out of me, okay? So yes, I kept telling folks that that I was fired, and so I was rejected, and then I finally got hired at Planned Parenthood, which was super exciting. And same deal, I told them what happened, and they still gave me a chance. And I'm forever indebted to them for that, because that really did like open up a path for me that I didn't know existed, right? I am forever grateful to Planned Parenthood of Illinois for the opportunities that they've given me. And, through nursing school, like tailoring my work schedule so that I could still go to school, right? And get, because it changes every semester, right? And nursing school undergrad is no joke. And I didn't have parents to pay my bills for me, right? To make sure that my car payment, my insurance and phone bill were paid for. I had gas in the tank. So, those 2 years of that intense associate degree program, was me working as much as I could, eating Lay's chips and tuna cans, right? to to feed myself so I can make it through. And it was totally worth it. So that was the big transition for me from ER tech to nurse. It was messy, right? And it's not always pretty and it's not always perfect. But, when we are in a situation where we have to make it work, we're going to make it work. I wish it could have been easier for me. But at the same time, I'm glad that it wasn't, because it made me appreciate what I have a whole lot more.
Yeah. And I would say situations like that, like you see other people making mistakes and they don't get the same harsh treatment. And so being terminated and, just falsely judged, it really sticks with you. Because I had a situation like that on like my first travel job where my contract was terminated, not for something that I did, just like false accusations. And it feels horrible. It just like lingers with you. You're just like angry because you can't it's nothing you could do to say. They already made up these false judgments and things like that. And it's like, I'm here to help and to do my job. And this is how I'm treated. And it just sucks. And it really sticks with you and hurts. So
it does hurt. And it makes you, it really causes you. It's like every encounter that you have where that you're being judged, mistreated, undervalued. It's like just you're laying another brick, right? And then you're just laying another brick. And so then it becomes this huge wall that you put up because you're fearful of all the interactions that you have. You're fearful of all of the endeavors that you're going to be experiencing because, again, you feel like you have this big old target on your back, Mm-hmm. And I talk about that again throughout the book. It's just I feel like I'm always like watching over my shoulder, yes. And you get to a point where you're like second guessing and double checking everything that you do, not in a healthy way, not mm-hmm. not in an accuracy way, but in a I don't want someone else to come for me sort of way. Mm-hmm. And living our lives with this shield around us is hard because it weighs on us, and it wears us down over time.
That's weathering. That's exactly what the weathering is. And that then can visually show up physically in our bodies, mentally, the issues that come with that. And it's also where a lot of people don't understand that when it's just like, yes, you are going through struggles, but your struggles aren't based off of your race. Your struggles aren't based off of your sexual orientation, your gender identity. It's not based off of that. Like, okay, I'm not saying that you don't struggle, but like you got different worries. So people need to be aware of that and understand that. And if you really do want to be helpful, be an ally, and be supportive, acknowledge that. Don't just be like, yeah, I struggle too, because this is just like, that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the specific struggles other people face, marginalized communities face, that are inflicted on us because of society, because of white supremacy. Like, we can talk about your struggles later. We're going to talk about this. This right now.
Exactly. And in the book, when you speak up, you tell, say, your nurse manager or your supervisor, you tell them like they're treating me unfairly because I'm Black, because I'm gay, because I'm X, Y, and Z. And then they gaslight you. They say, no, that's not that. It's not that. What you're experiencing is not racism. It's not sexism. It's not homophobia. And nothing's being done. And you have incidents in the book. It's not until like you leave because it's a toxic environment, you go somewhere else, and then they want to come back like, oh, we finally did something because we notice a trend. Multiple people are leaving X, Y, and Z. So now we want to do something. Now we want to put something in place. But it's like, y'all knew y'all had this problem. Y'all let it fester. Y'all let it go on, and nothing is being done.
There was, I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay, so there was a physician at my first hospital ever. And, part of it is I was working at a Catholic hospital, which, that can come with some things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And for me, it was actually this is the person that really triggered me to be like, you know what? I'm journaling every shift. I'm doing it. I don't care. Right. He came out of a patient's room one day and was like, oh, I just don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me when a woman is talking about my wife this, my wife that. And I just sat there like, wow, okay, so you felt bold enough to say that out loud in front of every single person that's sitting here right now. All these patients' doors are open. They can hear you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew what kind of person he was at that point. And this would be the person to really make me, uncomfortable. And what that would look like, it would look like this. Hey, doc, the person in room 4 wants Tylenol. Oh, okay. So order the Tylenol. Okay. So, right. And so, okay, fine. You want me to put the orders in so that you can do whatever you're doing. Great. So, next time, we have this issue. Hey, doc, I'm going to put in some Tylenol for room 6. I just want to let you know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rush me. Okay. What? Okay. Last time you said you wanted me to put the order in. Now I'm telling you I'm putting the order in. Now I'm rushing you. What do you want? Right? And it would just look like little petty stuff like this over and over and over again, and making me feel like I can't speak up. I can't advocate for my patients. I can't ask any questions, right? And what happens when we feel like we can't ask questions? We don't. And then what happens? People get hurt, right? So that was so frustrating for me. And yes, I will say that at this point in my career and in my life, I wasn't on my antidepressants yet. So I was very anytime something happened that got me upset, I would cry. But it wasn't me crying because I'm sad. It was just I was so frustrated that I would cry. And when I went to my manager to say, hey, look, this isn't just today. This is weeks and months. This is bad. I would get hit with don't take it so personal. It's not personal, right? And that really just that was the knife and then the turn for me, because I'm literally telling you, I'm giving you objective information, objective, situations and examples. And you're telling me that I'm taking it personal. Why? Because I'm crying? Because I'm visibly upset? You're not even giving me the chance, right? You're not even trying to understand from my perspective how this could look. And it wasn't just this doctor. There were other people who, again, target on my back. There were situations where people would be like, oh, hey, you gave that med wrong. After seeing me go to give the med, they would wait and then say, hey, you gave it wrong, right? Little did they know I called the pharmacy. So I know I didn't give it wrong. But why did you sit there and watch me give it and wait until I was done to tell me it was wrong, right? Because then it looks like you're trying to lay a trap. And I don't like that.
That's exactly what it sounds like, because you're literally watching it happen and then waiting until after the fact. No, if you cared and wanted to make sure that you were doing it correctly, you would step in immediately, be like, oh, wait a second.
Right.
How are you going to do this right now? And not just wait for you, but it reminds me too of you're taking it personal. It's the classic thing of you're too sensitive.
Yes.
And it all falls on you and your demeanor and your personality and how you handle things, when it's just no, it's the person inflicting this shit that needs to be addressed. But you were doing mental jumping jacks of okay, you said this one time, so let me change it up. I'm gonna switch it up my approach. And then it's oh, no, that didn't work either. Okay, let me recalibrate. Let me switch it up again. And you're you know what? There is no switching it up, because you just don't like me. You don't respect me. Right. And you want me always walking on eggshells because you don't really even want me here.
Exactly. And I was very, obviously very Black, obviously openly, gay. And so all of that played into the way that I was treated by these people. And, granted, this is again, I think it was a 98 point something percent white community. I was one of the very few Black people that lived in that community. I was one of 2 Black people that worked in the hospital. And right. So it was one of those things where, they were so used to, and a lot of them had been there for a long time, so they were used to their flow. They were used to their people. They were used to their bland, non-diverse crew. And here comes not just a Black person, but short-haired lesbian with tattoos who doesn't hide them, regardless of what your policy is. This is who I am, and I'm coming in. And if I'm hot, I'm taking my jacket off. Yes, my tattoos are on my skin. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but if I'm doing CPR on somebody, I'm not going to sit here and pass out, right? And so it was just, I was unapologetically me, and that bothered so many people, and they made it so clear that it bothered them.
And it's sad. And the thing about healthcare and medical professions, our first job is to do no harm, but we're harming each other in the process. We're letting our prejudices and our biases get in the way. The whole incident, if you didn't call the pharmacy about that medication, you were just going to let you give the medication incorrectly versus stepping in like, hey, I noticed you're about to give X, Y, and Z medication. How are you giving it? Do you know how to give it to help help the patient? But you would rather see a patient harmed in the process in order to get you fired, which that's insane.
I have to say that the patient was Black. And so, yep. Exactly. And that's it's not lost on me, right? That they noticed that this was a Black patient, and a Black nurse. And so what better way? 2 birds, 1 stone, right? If it's going to be anybody, let it be the Black patient that, and so it's just so crazy because yes, years passed and I get a phone call as I'm driving, down a California road that, hey, remember back in 2017 when you were right, like we're still seeing that, and I'm sorry that I didn't do anything about it then, but it's bad now. Right? It's affecting white folks now.
That's what it is. Oh my goodness.
And so we need a statement, okay? We need you to write a statement. It's just we could have prevented all that, right? We could have prevented all that if y'all had taken my concerns seriously. It's
yeah. This concludes part 1 of our wonderful discussion with Britney. Please subscribe and stay tuned for part 2 coming July 21st. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you would like to suggest a topic we should discuss or share your own personal story, email us at distrustanddisparities@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate, review, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Distrust and Disparities and on Twitter at DistrustPod.